myself. Hello and welcome to season 2, episode 12 of our podcast series, the podcast that inspires and educates through the sharing of real life experiences. I am Sheila, your host, and with me today is guest Nicole Jansen, joining in remotely. Nicole has been empowering women entrepreneurs for over 30 years. She's the founder of Discover the Edge and host of Leader of Transformation podcast, reaching listeners in over 140 countries. Nicole will be sharing with us today her personal stories in the area of health, relationship, and betrayal. Hello, Nicole, and welcome to Podcast with Sheila.
Thank you for having me, Sheila. I'm excited to be here today.
It's a pleasure to have you. So what will your favorite quote be?
My favorite quote is from Mother Theresa, and it's actually on my Discover the Edge website right now. And it is, I can do things you can't do, and you can do things I can't do. Together, we can do great things.
Great. Now let's begin with your health journey. So what is the story behind that?
So, adversity comes in different forms. And my health journey actually started off, overall, I've seen myself as a very healthy person. I was always very athletic and health conscious and so forth. But, and we'll talk a little bit about this later when we get to betrayal and so forth. But there was some things that happened in business. I actually started off getting into business very young, and my parents were entrepreneurs. I became an entrepreneur very young, and there was a lot of stress that came from, and I learned it later on that it was actually the emotional impact that was causing my health. But basically, what happened was I started having these unusual things happen with my skin. And so my mother used to always know when I was in high school, she would always know when I had a test. She said, "Oh, I can see it. It's all on your face. Your face is broken out." And so, but after a while, it got worse and worse when I was in my 20s. And I went to an environmental doctor who said, "You're allergic to all these things." And, and I thought, wheat, yeast, dairy, sugar,
All of
several
that.
fruits and so forth, all of that, right? So pollen, dust, all of those environmental things. It was like I went from not having any allergies growing up to having all of these things. So my system was literally being overwhelmed and couldn't process it. And so I went to that doctor. He told me this, he had recommended that I would have shots. I would have shots every week. I'd come back every week and get these 10 shots. And I said, "Well, did I mention that I don't like shots?" So I'm not really interested in doing that. So I went to someone else, and it didn't make sense to me, right? What are the shots going to do? They're going to maybe combat some of the symptoms, but not the cause. So then what I ended up doing is going further into homeopathics. And I really didn't know anything about this. This is like 20 plus years, 23 years ago now. And so I started going to homeopathic doctors, and I asked them, and they and didn't tell them what the other doctor had said. I just want to know what, get a second opinion. And the answers came back the same. And so I was like, okay, so I need to do something with this. So I eliminated all those things in my diet for 5 years. And I did went through this process of spending thousands and thousands of dollars on different health practitioners and so forth, because my natural, the Western medicine, my regular doctor, she didn't offer me any solutions, really. Her solutions were, drugs and all of that kind of thing. And in fact, actually, at one point I went, so my system, so this was revealing a deeper issue. So what we discovered is that my system was literally shutting down. It was like organ by organ. And so I went to one gentleman who discovered that he said, well, he says 2/3 of your digestive system is not functioning. And so I started doing all these physical things to be able to offset. So again, I eliminated all those things. I started eating healthy, taking all these herbs and, vitamins and supplements and all of these things. And I was getting better, but I still wasn't getting to the point of being fully healthy and recovered. And so I had it was a constant thing that kept going on and on. I had mono multiple times of all these different things. And I realized it was this immune system disorder.
Oh,
So the doctor said to me when I went back to her a couple of years later, she had said, "Oh, you have contact dermatitis, change your skincare. That's all I can suggest to you." When I came back and I told her this is all these findings I found, and she said, "Well, you know what? Um, I said to her, I would like to go to an allergist to kind of see how I'm improving,
yeah.
and she said, no, we don't do that. And she says, I don't send you to a specialist until we've done everything we
Oh,
possibly can here. And I said, well, you told me to go change my makeup, my skincare, which
yeah.
I did, and so, but what I'm seeing and really the symptoms that I was seeing were suggesting that if I didn't make a change, I would have ended up with several, possibly there were several different forms of cancer, different things. So diabetes,
Mm.
colon cancer, thyroid cancer, lymphoma, all of like
All of
based on the
that.
symptoms,
Yeah.
these things were all very solid
Possible. Yeah.
potentials. And so when I said that to her, she said to me, well, a lot of people are getting it. And I said, well, I'm here now and I'd prefer not to get there. I said,
Yeah.
so what you're telling me is that you wouldn't help, you're not going to help me now without, simply taking me through the drugs and the medication that you want to subscribe. Um, and or I can just leave it, and then when I come back years later and I have cancer, then you're going to be able to help me then. And so she said, oh yes, we have chemo, we have radiation, we have all these solutions for you at that point. And I said, well, I'm here now.
Yeah.
So that just continue. What I did is I left her office. I never saw her again. And so I started going back to and no discredit, there are some wonderful doctors out there. That was my experience. I went to another doctor she was Swedish. So I thought, she really was more advanced because
Yeah.
generally speaking, the Europeans are very
Yeah.
advanced
Yeah.
with those
Yes.
things.
Yes. Yes.
And so then I went to another doctor who was German, and then she suggested Botox. I'm like, what is going on with all of this? So
Yeah.
the long and short of it is that what I ended up doing is I had to, and I encourage my clients now who are going through different things, because it's part of life, right? So I coach
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, but we're dealing with the whole life situation, is that I had to take control of my own health. I couldn't delegate it to someone else. I couldn't abdicate it either to anyone else. It was something that I had to take on. And the blessing out of that was learning and understanding my body, learning what the symptoms, what my body was saying. And so what I was saying earlier about, I did all the physical things, there became a point where I realized this was no longer a physical issue. I had done everything physically and I had gotten to a plateau. And that's when I realized it was more of an emotional. I had to dig deeper. I had to go into the emotional, the mental and the emotional, and ultimately the spiritual level to be able to create the change, to create the healing that I was looking for. And that's what it took for me to get to that point. I mean, that was back when I was 26. And I was pretty sure with all the things that were going on, it's a full long story, but all those things going on and the manifestations of it in my body and what I experienced, I thought, I'm not going to see my 35th birthday. And that was very likely. And the doctor did not argue with me that was, she said, yeah, it's happening. A lot of people. And so I'm 48. I will be 49 next week.
Wow. Bless you.
And I'm healthy and
Yeah.
sure, I'm going through that life stage that
Yeah.
us all as women, we go through, but ultimately I'm healthier than I've ever been before.
Wow.
And I attribute that to the work that I needed to do. And so it turned out that it was actually a blessing, because had I not paid attention, so I used to ask myself the question, why my skin? Like here I'm the athlete and I'm out in the sunshine and I'm get the fresh
Yeah.
air and I'm not into makeup and all that stuff and putting things on my face. And why that? And I
Yeah.
realized later that what a blessing it was, because if it hadn't been on my skin and so visible to me, I may not have paid attention. And
Yeah.
maybe it would have gone a lot further to the
Yeah.
point where
Yeah.
now I've got some serious issues to deal with.
Yeah.
So that may be irreversible and, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so it turned into a blessing once I dug deep, but it was a long period of time to get to the point of being healthy and knowing that I was beyond um, the critical zone, if you will.
So what exactly did you do to get the healing?
So I went to one naturopath, uh, homeopathic. I actually went to a series of different people. What would happen is I'd go to the first person. They got me to a certain point, couldn't take me any further. Then I ended up at their mentor. So then their mentor sent me to their mentor.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what to do, but you should talk to so-and-so.
Yeah.
And I actually ended up, and I'll give a shout out to, there's a lady in Canada. I'm originally from Canada. So
Okay.
I live in the US now, but she's in Canada, and her name is Andrea Basedo, and she has a house of healing. And so I ended up at Andrea's place, and she's German, living in Canada, and she has she's very skilled in many disciplines. And so I would go to her place. Actually, what's interesting is the first time I arrived, it's very non-traditional. And going to her place, I had only met her through someone else who was one of her students who had worked with me for a little bit doing lymphatic drainage and those types of things. And then she said, this is beyond what I'm capable of handling. So I'm going to send you to Andrea. So when I first arrived, so I'd only talked to her for 30 seconds on the phone just to book the appointment. When I got there, she opened the door and she gave me this big hug. So this is a stranger. Okay.
Yeah.
She doesn't know this person. She gives me this big long hug and says, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I love you. And just welcome. And I'm thinking, who is this woman?
Yeah.
That was many, many years ago, now 20 years ago. And I just couldn't imagine that someone would be so open and welcoming to someone that she didn't know.
No.
And that was one of the most powerful things that she did. So she did a lot of body work on me. I would go, and I went to her every 3 weeks for 18 months. Okay. But one of the things I told her later on, I said to her, I said, one of the most powerful things that you did was when she would do the work is that she would pour in love. She would pour in that healing and that intention. I could tell she was doing it, and so, so powerful, because that's actually what is needed to create healing, rather than it just being an intellectual thing. Yeah, you can deal with all
Yeah.
those things, but it's so much more than that. So I went from her, and then I went on to another gentleman who did some electroderma testing. So he would test and run the circuitry through your body, which indicates what's working, what's not,
Oh, yeah.
where things are. And he was another one that was a gift, because he did not actually tell me when I first got there how bad it was. He was like, oh, just like Andrea. She's like, oh, no problem. No problem. We'll take care of this. Right? No problem.
Yeah.
And but it was only months later that when I was going to him, because he could have this, he had all these details that would show up on his screen. Like, so he was testing it and it would show up on the results on the screen.
Yeah.
And he started showing me the improvement. And I'm so glad that he didn't tell me in the beginning when I was first there how bad it actually was, because it was literally off the scale. And so having these people that knew what they were doing, but that also had the wisdom to go along with it, to say, no problem, like that, not to cause more anxiety and stress in me, not to lie to me, but also not to cause more stress and anxiety, but to create hope and belief, and saying, knowing in their ability to be able to help me through it. And they did. And those two people were probably the two most instrumental. And then when I came down here, I had some issues. I had mono again through some relationship. We'll talk about relationship and betrayals that happened when I was down here, that I was looking for somebody. And I went to another gentleman down here who has been amazing, helped me get through strep throat and mono and hives and all sorts of crazy things. I had hives over 80% of my body for weeks on end, and he was able to get that, sorted out really quickly. So when you find the right person or the right people, it really can make a difference. But again, it did come back to then looking at what was it in me that was causing this? And I do believe in my experiences is that there is a direct correlation between emotional and physical issues. And so I had to look at the emotional, what was going on at that level that was causing my system to literally auto toxify.
Yeah.
Like I literally, my whole system was toxic. And so, here I am thinking I'm a positive person. I've been in personal development for all these
Yeah.
years, but there were certain things, unforgiveness. I had to let go of unforgiveness. I had to let go of the resentment, the bitterness, the
Yeah.
fear, the doubt, the criticism, the judgment, all of those things, and start to learn how to love myself and love others, even those that
Yeah.
have hurt me. And that was where it was really freeing to me, and where I found peace there. I then found peace
Wow.
physically in my body, and it's noticeable in terms of even how that shows up when I go and they test me and so forth. It's like, it literally it manifests physically in how I feel. And my skin, even though my skin's been through the mill,
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's better now than it was when I was 20, in terms of its health. And so I'm just so grateful.
You look amazing.
Thank you. Thank
The,
you.
listening to your story it doesn't show on your skin at all. Nothing is showing on your skin. But that thing you said about the resentment and everything else, I'm thinking that our body is like a mechanism. So it's whatever we put in is what we get out.
Yes.
So sometimes when we harbor hate and then all of those things, it doesn't help.
That's right.
So when you let go, then you heal. So it's actually when you're harboring those things, you're harming yourself rather than.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like when there's a saying, unforgiveness, or some people would say bitterness. It's this really two different things, but either way, it's like if you have that and you're harboring that,
Yeah.
it's kind of like drinking poison
Yeah.
and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
Right? You're
Yeah.
putting this actually, so you look at it and you say, is the unforgiveness for them or is it for me? Well, the answer is
Yeah.
actually both. I do believe it's both,
Yeah.
because we are all energy. And so when I'm holding bitterness and resentment or unforgiveness towards you, there is an impact on you ultimately, or the things I might say to you,
Yeah.
right? The words that I say, because our
Yeah.
words have power.
Power.
Right?
Yeah.
Life and death are in the power of our
Power.
tongue. So
It's
when we
true.
say things, we can curse people
Yeah.
with our word.
Yeah.
Okay. So those things are really, really, that's why I'm a big advocate of being careful and I encourage people to be careful with the words that you say, the thoughts that you think, but how it also comes out your mouth. So what are you saying to yourself internally? What are you saying about others? What are you saying to about yourself,
Yeah.
verbally as well? And because it's very powerful. But yeah, so when you release that, there is, you're not holding on to that. It's literally, because everything is energy. Your thoughts are energy, and they're literally creating chemical reactions in your body. And that's why I think we are seeing heart disease. There's a book, Louise Hay has a book out there called You Can Heal Your Life. And the premise of the book is that, of course, your emotions, like we're talking about, emotions and your physical are interrelated, your mind, your body, and your spirit. And so she has a list in there of things that certain ailments, and the possible emotional high that is causing that.
Okay.
And I have tested this for myself, and I look through and I go, oh wow, yeah, I remember that. Like, I wish I had that book a long time ago.
Yeah.
But so I'm going through this and I'm like, wow, that is so accurate.
Wow. Interesting lessons in there. Wow. Let's move on quickly to relationships. So what happened? What's the story behind relationship and betrayal for you?
So from relationship, so I've had the privilege, the experience of having experienced betrayal on several levels. So So I alluded to it there, even when I was very young, with a young boy in town. When I was 6, I had an issue there that caused me to feel very vulnerable and distrust. And so then that kind of developed into my 20s and so forth. So had a boyfriend that fooled around on me. Then later on had a husband, which is what brought me to the U.S. Had my husband that actually was unfaithful and lied about it. And so there was all of that. And then there was also, from a business standpoint, one of the greatest, and that's where all this health stuff really started to accelerate, was that like I told you, my parents were entrepreneurs, and they had started a business, a home-based business in their, when I was about 7. Okay. So it was in direct sales. And so I was actually very involved in that business, even from the age of 7, helping out, opening boxes, and then developing from there. And so uh, we built a very successful business. And by the time I was in my mid-20s, it was very, very profitable. I thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And that business ended up falling apart through a series of betrayals, a series of poor decisions, lack of leadership, but also from my parents' standpoint, my parents, one of the things, they were loyal to a fault. They kind of believed that things will work out, it's going to be okay, and it didn't. And it didn't, because there were certain people that had an agenda. There was greed and ego that kicked in, and so started to go around my parents and undermine their leadership, and destroy relationships, and as a result of that, destroyed the business, and caused my parents to lose everything. Actually, my dad, that was the second time my dad lost a business, or went bankrupt. The first time was when I was 12, and he had gone down to Brazil to invest, sold his business, had gone down a different business, had gone down to Brazil to invest in a business that he had done a lot of research that was going to be very lucrative, and ended up, everybody disappeared who was going to be investing with him, and he was left, and that was naive. He was very naive. And so he had signed the contract, but then everybody else who was supposed to sign the agreement took off. And so the Brazilians, they don't care. They're like, you signed it, give us the money. So there was a whole situation that went there. So we had this like series, it was almost became a theme, right, of corruption, disappointment, in so forth. And it really, for me, got to a head, got to that tipping point, or that point of just like, we need to stop and do something very different. Was with my husband. That was the most devastating. I mean, it was devastating to lose a business. I had to start all over again. I mean, I poured 20 years of my life, almost my entire life, into a business, my parents as well. And we lost everything and had to start again. But that's one thing. But when it happens in your home at a very personal, intimate level, it can really affect you, on a different level. And so I had that, and I say I had the opportunity, or had the privilege of experiencing that, because there was a blessing. Once again, there is a blessing in that. Number one, we can talk about, like, even like, so was my health affected? Absolutely. And that's why I ended up having to find somebody down here to work it out. But I knew that was the direction I needed to go, and I could quickly combat it, versus years prior where I didn't have any information and I was learning. It took me a lot longer to figure out what process to take to be able to get that healing. Down here, I was able to do it a lot quicker. I mean, there's so many lessons that came out of it, and so many blessings, and I wouldn't be who I am today, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for all of those things.
Wonderful. 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 I'm so inspired by your story. And I'm thinking that, well, in the area of betrayal, as in relationship, personal relationship, and I think a lot of women are going through that as well. And sometimes it overwhelms them, or they allow it to overwhelm them, or they don't have a choice, especially when the woman is unemployed and is going through that situation. And there's nothing she can do about it, because she can't leave the relationship either, because she doesn't know where to start from. And probably there are
Yes.
children with her. And she's thinking of how she's going to support the children and all that. And the relationship isn't any better anyway. And it's draining her emotionally. And she's not the best of herself, but she can't leave as well. And sometimes I think about all these people. That is why I'm drawn to empowering women.
Yes.
And I've done this for, I think my best work in life is what I have done. And I felt drawn towards that direction when I came out of the university and couldn't find a job, even when I had a first class. And I was thinking, what could I do, to be effective to my generation? And I always think when I'm doing something, I'm thinking, when I'm no more, what will people remember me for?
Yeah.
There should be something they can remember me for. And I'm drawn towards women and children more, because anytime there is a situation, the woman and the child suffer more, because the man gets to walk away with no attachments unless he tells you, I have a child, or I was once married. It's not written on his face, and he can always hide it. But the woman cannot. Even our physical appearance will give us up, because once you give birth, you've changed, and the children are always with you. And I'm passionate about women.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I talk about women, I tend to cry, because I've met multiple women who go through different things, and I feel the only way I can also make a difference is to make a change in the area of women. So I start small. That is why I train women with the skill that I know, because I only need to see a craft. I just have to look at it and I can do it. You see, so I train them, to be able to be handy all the time, so that if a situation should come up from your relationship, if you have just the children, you can at least be able to feed them, keep them going for a while until the bigger break comes in or help comes in. Yes. But I'm always, sometimes when I talk about it, it's as if I'm being passionate towards just the women and leaving the men. And then if my husband was here, he would say, we men also go through things. You women do a lot of things to us. But we appreciate that. But it looks like the women always suffer the most when there is a crisis like this. And I'd like to say thank you very much, Nicole, for sharing your story. And for some reason, I think 56% of our listeners are men. I don't know why it's like that, but 56% of them are men, 26% are women, and then the rest are unknown. So we can't tell, but even if we are supposed to tell, I'm sure the majority of the people listening will be men. So I'm going to use
my clients. Yeah, most of my clients actually traditionally have been men.
Yeah.
Interesting. And men do go, to your point, men do go through it differently. And I have experienced with my clients some difficult situations where the men were the ones that were, if you will, the victims in the, they were hurt. Men are more sensitive than we give them credit for. And and so that being said, to your point about women, I do believe that there are a lot of women that are gravely hurt through these situations and find themselves at risk because they maybe have been home and they don't have a skill, they don't have a job, and so they find themselves stuck. And that's why podcasts like yours can encourage them. They need to have a source of encouragement. Even if they're all on their own, it's good to have friends that can support, but some people don't even have that.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of like at the same point and everybody's complaining, but nobody's willing to do it. Do anything about it, or don't know how to do anything about it. And so to have someone that can take them and bring them, like yourself, who can say, here's a solution and let me help you out of it, then they can be an example for those that are around them. But it takes the one who will actually step up, or the woman who will say for her children, it stops here. It stops here. I'm not going to allow whatever the abuse is or whatever to pass on to, my children. I had a friend many years ago, a gentleman. His wife was just crazy. And her whole family was just, this was like a pattern.
Oh,
The women treated the men very, very poorly. I'll put that diplomatically.
yeah.
Treated the men very poorly. And it took, I mean, he did not want to come, he did not want to divorce her because he didn't want his children, because he came from a broken home, didn't want his children
Yeah.
to be subject to that same, you know, that same
Yeah.
experience that he
Yeah.
had. But at some point, I think it was his daughter was about 11 or 12 and his son was a little bit older. And he looked one day at his daughter and he thought, I don't want my daughter to grow up like that and continue the pattern.
Pardon. Yeah.
And I don't want my son to grow up and to marry a woman that will do that to him, to continue it on. It stops here.
Yeah.
It stops here. And so he had to make the difficult decision of saying it's enough. And it cost him a lot. It cost him a lot. You know, she tried to take the kids and all of that. And anyway, so that's another story. But I've seen some men really have find themselves in very difficult situations, or where their children are taken away and they're actually the one that's stable, you know, but because the courts give the children to the parent, to the mother,
Yeah.
because they think that that's the best choice when it's not. So there are difficult situations.
Yeah.
Anytime family is broken up, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt everybody. There's nobody that gets away without being hurt through that situation. Yeah. The key is, though, and you know, I talked a little bit about it earlier, and is that it's really, really important that no matter for yourself, for the other person, but even if you don't do it for the other person, for yourself, to forgive, to
Yeah.
forgive yourself for making the decisions that you feel you look back on and go, oh, why did I do this? Why did I marry this person? Or why did I make this decision to do this or not do this or whatever, is to forgive yourself and also to forgive the other person, to let it go. Don't let them continue to take up space in your
Yeah.
heart rent free.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Wow.
actually costing you. It's not even that it's rent free. It's actually costing.
Costing
You are
you.
paying. Think about
Yeah.
it. You're paying to have them still
Stay.
lingering on with you, and they are going to impact the next relationship that you have if you go into another relationship. It will linger in your health. It will linger in your relationships. It'll linger in your business. It is insidious, you know. So one of the things I learned real quick through the situation with my husband, and now ex-husband, is that God, I said, God, what do I do with this? And long story short, he said to me, he said, love your husband. Oh, love my husband. How am I supposed to love my husband? My husband left. He's with another woman. How am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
And um, and he said, love your husband. Initially, it was when we were still living in the same place, separate rooms. And then it was even then after that, when he was gone and he was with this woman, I was like, what do you, and he said, love your husband. And so I thought, can't even talk to him. He won't even pick up the phone. You know, he won't respond to texts. He's just gone off the deep end and self-sabotaging and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm trying to tell him that I love him, that I believe him, that he'll get through this. And nope, none of it works. And God said, just love your husband. And I said, how am I supposed to? So I started to send him spiritually with prayers. I would send him love. 2.5 years, I did that. About 18 months in, before he actually, then we got divorced, and actually funny, anyway, that's a whole other story. We actually ended up getting back together.
Okay.
Because of the healing that happened through that period of time. And he realized that I actually did forgive him. Not only had I forgiven him, but I actually had gotten to the point where I realized there was nothing to forgive, because of the gift that I had experienced through it. That the whole experience was the greatest growth period in my life. And what I learned of the self-love, self-acceptance, the forgiveness, and the depth of love that I could have for somebody, even when they're hurting me, was worth all of it. Don't want to go through it again, but thank God I don't need to, because I got the lesson. But so that actually blew him away, and to the point where he actually said, wow, I need to reevaluate this. But anyway, going back to this love your husband, what I realized is after 18 months is that God, it wasn't about whether or not he was going to come back to me, because I was praying, hoping that he was going to, sending him love. So hopefully he's going to come back, right?
Mm.
And what I realized after 18 months, the reason why I got that instruction, love your husband, you can look at it from a spiritual standpoint for if there's any believers listening, but love your husband. There's actually, the Bible says God is your husband.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's that play on words, right? But love your husband, it actually, what it caused me to do is to heal my heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
It healed my heart. So no matter what happened between us, I was whole and complete through that process.
Exactly.
And it took me 18 months to get to that point of being whole and complete, that I could love him no matter what he decided to do. And so when he decided, hey, I actually, you know what, I'd like to come back. I would like to explore that. And I was like, whether you come back or not, I'm whole and complete.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's power. That's power. Exactly. Now from there you can build.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, I know we've gone on longer than you anticipated, I think, but
wow.
This is amazing. This has been helpful.
This is amazing. This is amazing. Let's talk quickly about your podcast, Leaders of Transformation podcast. What inspired it?
So that was what I call a divine download in 2015. I was in the midst of all of this going on. Okay. My husband actually had left in 2014, and it was in 2015. I had some situations, again, another business that I had, a franchise had shut down. The system itself was defunct. So I lost my investment and I was starting over, a lot of mess. So I'm in the midst of this and I'm saying, God, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Everybody's saying you got to put out content. I'm like, I don't really feel like putting out content right now. Right now, my heart hurts. And so I woke up one morning at 4:30 and he said, you're going to do a podcast. It's going to be called The Leaders of Transformation. You're going to interview difference makers and world changers. Go. And I said, when am I going to do this? And he said, now. And I said, like, now, or do I like create a strategy and a plan now? He said, now. So I took him literally, and it's not like I heard a voice. It was a knowing right inside. Yeah. And I said, okay, I don't know anything about podcasting, but I called a friend. He talked to him for about 15, 20 minutes. And he gave me some information about what I needed to know about podcasting. And I was live 3 weeks later. So. Wow. That was obedience is what that was. And it was an answer to prayer, because in the process of doing that, talking about association, right? Yeah. Is I reconnected to some amazing people in my community. Here I'm in the midst of all this stuff going on. Can't really tell people about it because you got to be careful who you talk to about stuff like that, and that they can't handle it, or they're going to make decisions and their words are going to seal the coffin, if you will, so you got to be careful with that. But I started connecting and interviewing people from my network who were amazing difference makers. They started to introduce me to other people, and then other people, and then and now we're 375, almost 380 episodes in. I've met some amazing people, and I got around a bunch of people that were inspired and were on fire and creating transformation, and reminded me of it. Kind of brought me back to my own fire, my own inspiration, and why I was doing what I was doing. And so it was a blessing in that moment to be able to do that and I could create content without me having to create my own, solo shows and all that. I could just interview. And I was always, as a coach and speaker and trainer, I'm always, looking at how can we bring out the strengths in others, maximize people's potential. And so to showcase others and to celebrate their awesomeness and what they're doing was easy for me. I could do that. Yeah. And it got me back into this space and back on my game again. So it was great.
Wow. Now let's talk about leaders and leadership. What does it take to be an effective leader?
Well, there's books, volumes of books written on leadership. So, there's a long answer and there's a short answer to that. I'll give you the short answer. It really does come down to the qualities of a leader. And I think the number one thing that you need to have to be a great leader is integrity. Integrity is being whole and complete, nothing in the shadows, nothing in the dark, everything in the light. So you need to be in integrity. If you are corrupt, you will, or you're doing anything kind of like shady, you will multiply that through the people that you lead, your teams and so forth. So integrity is essential. The second thing is you got to have vision. You got to know where you're going. You got to know why you're going there. And you got to be able to enroll people in that vision.
Yeah.
To be able to people say to sell, right? To be able to sell them into your idea, but to enroll them in your vision. But you have to have the vision that's big enough and bold enough and big enough in the sense that it's actually large enough to encompass other people, not just yourself, in that vision, so that you can lead. And leaders, and the way I define leadership is really is not just building followers, it's actually building other leaders. So it's in that context that I'm referring to this. And then the third thing is, I believe you need to have empathy. And you have to have empathy for people because everybody's at different points on their journey. And so they may not be as quick as you, they may not be as skilled as you, or experienced as you, but they can still bring value. And so having empathy for people, and people are going to go through things. There's not about excuses, but it's about having empathy for where people are at. And so that people can trust you to know that you actually care about them, that you really care about them, that you really care about their dreams, that you care about their family, that you care about their concerns and their fears and their success.
Wow. It's been lovely having you on podcast with Sheila and Nicole, and your life experience you shared with us. I think they are golden, and I'm so inspired. I believe a lot of people who'll be listening, if not all, will be very inspired by the story and the lessons you shared with us. Very, very inspiring as well. So I'd like to say a very big thank you for coming. And before we wrap up quickly, I'll say, where can our listeners connect with you?
Sure. You can go to leadersoftransformation.com, and that's my podcast website. You can access me through there. And of course, we're all on all the social media platforms. So thank you. And thank you for having me, Sheila.
It's a pleasure.
It's been such a pleasure. And I love what you're up to, and your passion is just, it's beautiful. It shines right through.
Thank you very much for honoring our invitation. If you've been listening in, this is season 2, episode 12 of our podcast series, where we've been bringing your way seasoned guests with inspiring life stories to share with us. Do not miss out on all these lovely experiences. Subscribe and be notified when a new podcast is released. We have a video presentation of this show on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to see us in pictures, just search for Podcast with Sheila on YouTube and you'd find us. Until we meet again in a fortnight, have a lovely week.